Talk to me about particularly the transition, because you start the book actually at the very beginning saying, I got fired.
Yep.
And pressing Steve Bannon to say, well, who really fired me? Because I don't believe you did it. But you had all these binders. They were going to explain exactly how the Trump administration would work. They didn't get used.
Nope.
What would have been different if the Christie plan had been implemented?
Well, to be clear, I was the chairman of the transition, but we had 140 people working at an office in Washington, D.C. from May to November on everything from personnel and having 3 different folks vetted for every cabinet position, every senior staff position. We had executive orders drafted based upon what the then candidate had talked about during the campaign. We had white papers drafted on all the different subject matters that he brought himself up in the campaign and had implemented. We had a day one plan, 100-day plan, a 200-day plan on implementation. And we had a plan for every day of the transition, what stuff he should be focused on, and what names he should be rolling out each day to set a theme and a course for the country that was organized, orderly, and effective in terms of managing public opinion.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that's the way it played out. I mean,
no.
One of the things, you named some of those 3 people you had for all the positions, and as I looked at it, I think Alex Azar may have been the only person who survived in the cabinet. But one of the people I'll talk about is Frank Keating, whom I know and think the world of for Attorney General instead of Jeff Sessions. So how would it have been different? We got so many acting in it right now.
Well, it's just that they've never caught up. You can't waste that time, those months before the election, which is what they did by throwing out the work. You wasted all those months, and then you had 73 days to get it all together. You're running from behind the entire time. And so we still have all kinds of spots vacant or held by actings. On Alex Azar, in particular, he was #1 on our list for HHS, never presented to the president. But when the president finally did meet him, he hired him. And I think that shows one example of the power of what we were doing. I'm a subscriber to the garbage in, garbage out theory of management. And if you're giving him bad choices, he can't possibly make good ones. And if he does, it's just lucky. And a lot of the folks they put in front of him didn't belong being in front of him.
So was this ever going to be different from what it ended up in this sense? You've run some big operations with the U.S. Attorney's Office, governor of the state of New Jersey. You've run big organizations, which is different from just going out a stump and giving speeches, something like that. Donald Trump has a different background. I mean, he ran a business, but it was not a very big business. He didn't have tens of thousands of people working for him. He's not the sort of person, is he, to follow a playbook the way you laid it out?
Well, he didn't have to follow the playbook necessarily. The folks who were presenting, listen, when an executive picks a whole bunch of people to work for him, a lot of what he goes on are the recommendations of his most senior folks of who to consider. And unless he has someone particularly in mind, like, for instance, Wilbur Ross at Commerce. Well, they were old friends. He knew Wilbur. Steve Mnuchin at Treasury. Again, old friends and business associates. But you go much beyond in the cabinet, Stephen Mnuchin and Wilbur Ross. The rest of those people were all people who were brand new to the president, and they were presented to him as, you know, possibilities in a way that they weren't vetted, and it created a whole lot of problems, not to even mention what happened with the White House staff, which was a complete disaster and turned into a Game of Thrones type operation.
Can you trust him? I mean, it's clear from your book, you've been a friend of Donald Trump's for a long time now. And yet, and even in your book, you were kind of situation with so-called Bridgegate in New Jersey, where he told you, I know you didn't know about it. And then once he gets an endorsement, you get an endorsement he doesn't like in New Hampshire, he goes out and says exactly the reverse.
Yeah, listen, he did that. And I've seen that happen before in the heat of a political campaign, where people go out and they lose their cool. What I know is that the next day, he called me, he apologized, and said he would never do it again, knew it was wrong, and you know what? He never did it again.
So if that's in the heat of a political campaign, what about as President of the United States? There are a lot of things that Donald Trump has said that are not supported by the facts. Well, how do we believe him as president? Well,
I think part of it is that he's been a salesman his whole life. And salesmen use hyperbolic rhetoric in order to try to make a point. And the underlying point may be correct, but maybe some of the rhetoric surrounding the point, not so much. And I think the president is still very much adjusting to his new world. You know, he spent 40 plus years as a real estate developer, making everything big and great and wonderful. And sometimes in government, it's not the case. So I think he's still learning that in terms of toning down the hyperbolic rhetoric a little bit.
So you've been a successful politician. You've run for office. You've attained office. New Jersey governor, as I've said. From your experience, including having run for president, is someone going to challenge President Trump in the primaries on the Republican side?
I don't believe so, not the way he's positioned right now. If you look at the latest polls of Republican primary voters, he has 81% job approval. That doesn't leave you a whole lot of room to challenge him. Now, you know, if those numbers change, then there will obviously be people who will look at it, because there are always ambitious people who want to run for president of the United States and think they could do a good job. But I don't see anyone doing that now. I don't see the landing strip for them to be successful in a primary against an incumbent president. So I firmly believe that President Trump will be renominated and be the Republican candidate in 2020.
Let's talk about New Jersey. You're a New Jersey boy through and through. That comes through in your book, without a doubt. Talk about the infrastructure in New Jersey, particularly with transit. Do you have regrets about what you didn't do with transit? And do you have directions for the current governor about what he should be doing? Well,
you know, it's interesting. We increased the funding to New Jersey Transit during my 8 years by 56%. This was an average of a 7% increase a year. So this whole myth that has been developed in the last year that somehow New Jersey Transit was starved of resources is just not true. It's not backed up by the facts. Now, in the end, there's a lot of problems at transit. The biggest one being the competition in this area between NJ Transit, the MTA. So many of our best folks got stolen by the MTA. They're paid more by the MTA than they're paid by us. And I think the biggest thing I regret is not getting a handle on the salary structure and being willing to take the risk to pay people a lot more because of the competitive environment we live in. So as a result, we lost good people both from management and from engineers that we had. It's hard to replace those folks in today's world in the mass transit side on rail. So that's one of the things I regret. But this idea that somehow that we starved New Jersey Transit, believe me, almost no other area of government during my 8 years got a 7% annual increase.
So finally, let's talk about the House of Representatives that went over to the Democrats, in part because of some seats that were switched in the state of New Jersey.
A lot.
How important was state and local taxes to that? Do you think the Republicans were right to take the position they did on state and local taxes?
Well, I took that position when I was running for president because it's one of the only ways to responsibly pay for certain tax cuts that you want to do. My plan was a little bit different than the one they implemented, but in the end, I think that, you know, it's something that we're going to have to see what effect does it have on the real estate market in New York and New Jersey in particular, and what effect does it have on people's ability to be able to continue to live here. Now, you know, in the end, I think those seats changed more over Obamacare than they changed over the state and local tax issue. A lot of those votes to repeal Obamacare came back to bite a lot of Republican representatives because they didn't get it accomplished. And so their supporters were frustrated because it wasn't done, and those who opposed them were frustrated because they didn't even vote for it in the first place. And they got caught in a vice that politically was tough for them to come back from.
So finally, let's come back to the title of your book. Toward the end of your book, you say you're not finished. And you lay open several possibilities, but one of them is elective office. Are you still interested in elective office? And is there only one job left for you, really?
There really is only one job left.
So will you run for president?
We never know. I mean, you know, you never say never. I'm 56 years old. So you don't preclude yourself when you have, hopefully, a very long life ahead of you. So I would never preclude myself from doing that. But the only way I would do it, David, is if I could see a path to victory for myself. I'm not one of those guys who wants to run for president just for the fun of it, just to be in the middle of it. I would only run if I really thought I had a strategy and a pathway to win. If I do, then I could see myself doing that again someday. If I don't, then I wouldn't run for office again.